Thank you very much. I'm quite impressed to be with you tonight. I don't want to be negative, but dear friends and colleagues, of course we are here to talk about archaeology, but it seems difficult for me to open this presentation without mention of what had happened in Paris over the last few days. Because I'm French and I have been deeply affected at the core of my being, as I have my fellow countrymen and women, because we all, you as well as me, are intellectual, committed to freedom of thought and to democracy. In France, we have had a terrible shock. We have wept, we have been and still angry. We have been supported through the world by men and women of peace, devoted to humanity in its fullness sense. Archaeologists are not at present in the front line, but we know that archaeology is a sensitive field whose scientific results can be twisted for ideological purpose to legitimize horror. This tragic event clearly reminds us that we must be vigilant and that intellectual liberty, whether in words or in image, is fragile. Darkness fields of ignorance. Tolerance and humor are carried, but knowledge, analysis and reflection. Our mission is precisely this, to give substance to science, to provide understanding, seriously and with humor. Access to understanding is at the heart of the project that we will present this evening. It's a teeny piece of a huge structure that we must watch over with care. So this evening we would like to brief you on the result of a major international project that finishes this June after 3 years duration and a long collaboration. Its focus was the cross-channel cultural connection that existed in the second millennium BC, involved 7 partners, institutions from 3 countries, France, Belgium and UK. So we'll do something of a double act this evening, but in doing so we are of course representing all of the project team. We both would like to thank them formally for all their work and insight over the years. Sorry, I wanted to present that because we love them and they are sad and angry like us. Peter.
Okay, thank you, Anne. So, the genesis of the project lay in part in the discovery of the Dover Bronze Age boat in 1992 in the far southeast corner of Britain. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this discovery, I just want to briefly recap the salient points of the find. Going the wrong way, just to mess with your mind upside down. So we are at the periphery, right at the top there. But Dover, absolutely wonderful that this ancient port, the far southeastern tip of England, should be the location where we found one of the oldest seagoing boats in the world. So I just want to remind you there a little bit of the geography. We're going to Aberdeen tomorrow to talk as well. So, and the other 2 places there are Boulogne-sur-Mer in France, where we had an exhibition, and in Arma, another major museum in Belgium. So some of the places that we'll be talking about this evening. Wrong way again. So here's the boat. The boat was found by our colleague Keith Parfitt during a watching brief during road construction in the heart of Dover. The boat lay perfectly preserved in 6 metres below the modern street in layers of waterlogged silts and tufa silts. Initially we were given just 24 hours to record and salvage the find, but eventually that crept along, and in the end we had 2 weeks to recover the find, and the importance of which was realised from the moment of its discovery. It was clear during excavation that the boat was incomplete. However, it was no shipwreck, but was deliberately dismantled at the time of its abandonment in antiquity. There was no cargo, though a small piece of shale found on the bottom of the boat proved to be from Kimmeridge Bay in Dorset, perhaps a clue to the range of its operations. It's now been dated to 1575 to 1520 Cal BC, at 95% probability. But further evidence of its seagoing capabilities lay in a layer of glauconitic sand in the base of the boat, a type of sand that doesn't exist in the Dow Valley at Dover, so it had to go to sea, whatever people say about its method of construction. We found about 9.5 metres of the vessel's length, with a maximum width of around 2.2 metres. The northern end of the boat here, we couldn't recover, for political reasons mainly. The road building that we'd interrupted was already something like 2 months behind schedule, and they said enough's enough. It's been the bane of my life ever since that we didn't find that other end. So the boat itself, as found, consisted essentially of 4 oak planks, 2 bottom planks sewn together, jointed together by a complex system of transverse wedges and transverse timbers here, hammered through upstanding cleats and rails. 2 curving side planks were stitched to the bottom with twisted yew withes. There was evidence for at least 2 further planks that had been removed when it was abandoned, side planks on each side, upper side planks, and at this end what we presume was an end board that had been ripped out in antiquity. The boat was made waterproof with moss along the seams and a mix of beeswax and animal fat in the stitch holes. The technology was similar to that of other Bronze Age boat finds, such as those from Ferriby and Goldcliff and elsewhere, but at the same time was quite different. Now, to get the boat out of the ground, it had to be sawn into 32 pieces. This was a hard decision to make at the time, and we were very much criticised for it, but it did mean that the pieces could fit into a freeze-drying tank at the Mary Rose Trust in Portsmouth, who were able to conserve the boat pieces very quickly. The conserved pieces returned to Dover in August 1998, when began the painstaking process of reassembling the pieces, a labour of trial and error which took some 10 months to achieve. The boat was complete in its new gallery in July 1999, when work began fitting out the new gallery of Bronze Age life, with the brainchild of the Dover Bronze Age Boat Trust, with financial support from the Heritage Lottery Fund, English Heritage and many others. The new gallery opened in November 1999, just in time for the new millennium. It's still open, and if you ever find yourself in Dover, perhaps en route to Europe by the ferry, I recommend that you stop for a while and pay a visit, because it really is quite a remarkable object. But while all this was going on, I'd been working with a large multidisciplinary team studying the boat itself. Back in the 1990s, nautical archaeology was still seen as a somewhat separate discipline to mainstream or terrestrial archaeology, and the focus was very much on the technical capabilities and the constructional techniques of hull forms and types of ship. But I was determined that equal attention should be given to the social context of the boat. Who built it and why? Where did it travel to? How was it perceived by contemporary society? To this end, I organised a conference on the 10th anniversary of the discovery entitled The Dover Bronze Age Boat in Context. And it was at this conference that we found the second strand of thought that was going to give birth to the Boat 1550 BC project. I'd been wondering how the large, complicated and technologically sophisticated boat represented by the Dover find related to contemporary settlement evidence in southern Britain, which seemed to consist of isolated farmsteads scattered across the landscape. However, at the conference, news emerged of a large site that had been excavated a couple of years after the boat, in 1994-95, at Le Montbagard, near Étaples, on the French coast. Here was a huge enclosed settlement of Middle Bronze Age date, i.e. roughly contemporary with the Dover boat. And I wondered, was this the kind of place that would have had need of a boat like Dover? Furthermore, Yves de Fossé, the excavator, was intrigued by what appeared to be English-style round houses at the site, quite different from the continental rectangular houses known at the time. This was new evidence from commercial archaeology that was to reawaken the interest in cross-channel connections in prehistory. 2 years later, the technical monograph on the detailed study of the boat appeared in print. But even as it was published, I was aware there were a number of questions about the boat that we could not answer about it by studying the timbers alone. Questions of how the complex jointing actually worked, the caulking, its seaworthiness. Already the idea of conducting some experimental archaeology to build a reconstruction of the boat and to put it into the water was already taking shape. Another conference in Dover in 2006 looked more squarely at the new evidence coming from commercial archaeology and other types of research about cross-channel Bronze Age connections. It was at this conference that Stuart Needham introduced his idea of the maritory, that placed the sea at centre stage of a geographical system that linked communities across the water, a seemingly perfect model for the cultural similarities we could see either side of the channel. And I'll hand over to Anne now, who can explain what those similarities were. Anne.
We shall return to the concept of maritory a little later, but for now let us review the data that lead us to think about Bronze Age maritory in the Transmanche area, particularly the new data collected over the last 20 years. Our initial focus was on the Dover Strait, the strait of the water between the white cliff of Dover on the English side and the high bluffs of Cap Grinet and Cap Blaney of the French coast. As you can see here, we are close neighbors with just 21 miles, so 33 kilometers, separating the island of Britain from the continent. On a clear day, it is easy to make out the opposite shore, like the view on the white cliff from the beach at Bisson, as shown here. However, as more information came to light, it seems that the Transmanche zone of cultural interaction was more extensive than original through, forming part of the broader Atlantic zone along the Western European seaboard. A key concept for those of us discussing this data was the sea was a highway and not a barrier, as it is so often perceived today. From the beginning of the 19th, new legislation in many countries of Western Europe, including Britain and France, brought archaeology into the mainstream of development programs. This leads to an explosion of rescue archaeology, we call it preventive archaeology in France. This has resulted in a wealth of new data for all periods, including the Bronze Age of the Transmanche area. That we can see is a remarkable similarity of cultural expression on both sides of the channel. For example, these ring dishes, the plot of remains of Bronze Age burial mounds, can be found in southeastern England, northwest France, and western Flanders. Some have 2 or even 3 concentric dishes, and they are very similar through the region. There are also similarities in domestic architecture. The English style roundhouse of Montbagat in Étaples have been found of many more sites from the north of France down to Normandy. We also find strong parallels in metal culture, such as pottery and metalwork. At a broader scale, archaeology finds the same similarity in skilled craft, like the production of gold jewelry, especially bracelet and twist torque, all along the Atlantic facade as far south as Portugal. So, the 3 key concepts behind the project were this. 1. The idea of some kind of cross-channel community in the Middle Bronze Age. 2. The reconstruction of the Dover boat itself, symbolic of these maritime links. 3. the desire to tell people and to share our knowledge. Thus, in January, we submit a proposal to Interreg for a 2C program of the European Commission for a 36 months long project. So from July 2011 to end of June 2014. Fortunately, the European Commission accepted the project. So, the project was built on a number of key concepts. As you see, developing knowledge about Bronze Age society, studying Middle Bronze Age Manche-Mer du Nord or maritory concept, reviewing the concept of frontiers, developing knowledge about the first maritime seafaring in Europe, explaining the work of the archaeologists and archaeological methodologies today, promoting understanding of ancient oral, non-literal society in official school program in France, in England, and in Belgium. To summarize, the project involved 7 partners institutions from 3 countries and a team of over 100 people. The project budget was nearly 2 million euros, all included, split between 4 key activities you show here. These activities were closely interlinked, and all of the partners worked closely together to achieve them. The concept of transversality was critical to the success of the project. Big adventure. Peter?
Okay, so thank you, Anne. The first thing, one of the key concepts, as Anne explained, was to build a replica, a reconstruction of the Dover Bronze Age boat. The boat, as I explained earlier, we'd only got part of it, and part of it, of course, had been dismantled and removed in antiquity. And one of the things we were very keen about, if we were going to enter into this exercise, was that we were to build a replica based on the best scientific information we could have. We had to hypothesize about these missing elements of the boat. We had to guess about things about the caulking and the jointing. But we were very keen that we did the best possible job. And I was very lucky, or we were all very lucky, in that we had 2 very senior experts who joined the project very early on. Richard Darrow, an expert in ancient woodworking techniques, and Ole Krummen-Pedersen, who you may know as a very senior maritime archaeologist who worked in Roskilde, who sadly passed away very recently. And Richard and Ole were very keen supporters of the project and became very involved, and we did a complete reassessment of the vessel. We went right back to the original archives, studied them all again using the latest analytical techniques. We even opened up the case in the Dover Bronze Age Boat Gallery and got in there and re-measured the timbers, took got new data. And this resulted in some very interesting and new insights into the original form of the Dover boat that were quite different from what I published in 2004. And ultimately I hope to publish these new findings in the coming year. But this was the foundation on which we based our reconstruction work, a new scientific reassessment of the boat timbers themselves. So we started at the beginning 2012, was it? Yes, to build our boat. And here you can see Richard Darrow, Robin Wood and the rest of the team. We were making a half-scale replica. We had thought about doing a full-scale in the original project design, but when we started looking at the logistical problems of that, particularly in an international team, it became clear that we were far too ambitious to think about a full-scale replica. So we kept it to a half-scale, which proved the right decision in the end. Sadly, we started in January to make this boat. We intended to launch the boat, to have a big public launch in May of that year, but we had the worst winter for goodness knows how long. At the beginning of the year, we had endless visitors coming to see us, which was good, but it slowed the work down. Of course, some visitors we couldn't say no to. And of course, we had open days. We involved, this was part of the project to tell people. We had lots of open days, lots of school visits, but with the weather, the visitors, dignitaries visiting us, goodness knows what, the work fell behind schedule, even though the team were working from the crack of dawn until late at night for many, many weeks. But this was the position of the boat builders in May 2012. This picture, as you can see, was taken 1.5 hours before the formal launch of the boat in Deauville Harbour. So the poor guys desperately working away, and you can see in the background the press were there, and people had come over from France and Belgium, and so everybody was there. Time team were there, and we put the boat in the water, and it promptly started to sink. I don't know if anybody saw that Time Team documentary on the TV, but it was an embarrassing day. It really was. We did patch it up a bit a couple of days later, but it was still taking in water. You know, the trouble with all this was that the boat was intended to form part of an exhibition that was going to be launched at the beginning of June in Boulogne-sur-Mer, and this opening day was completely unnegotiable. They'd invited all the big dignitaries to it. So the boat, if we'd had another couple of weeks then, we could have fixed the problem, but we didn't have those 2 weeks. The boat had to be taken to France to join the exhibition in Boulogne-sur-Mer. So it went away for a year. It was 6 months in Boulogne-sur-Mer, then it moved to Belgium, where it's part of our exhibition, for another 6 months, and we got it back to England in 2013. And we promptly took it apart completely, stripped it right down to its constituent planks, and then put it back together again using the original materials we knew about from the Bronze Age boat, moss and beeswax, and then tried again. This time we didn't have a public launch. We didn't do it under cover of night exactly, but we took it to a quiet little creek near Faversham where nobody was looking, and with our hearts in our mouths, put it into the water, and lo and behold, it sank. It didn't sink. It floated. And it worked beautifully. And I'll come back to this. One of the things that really struck me about this whole exercise was that we were working very much from the archaeological evidence. Ule and others had studied the timbers, and we were not actually making a boat, but we were trying to work out what the original timbers told us about the shape, told us about how they were joined together, and almost by accident we made the most beautiful boat, very manoeuvrable, very stable, very easy to paddle along, to propel. And after our experiences on the creek, we decided, okay, we'll put it into the sea. And so we had a little launch in September, I think it was, the first time we went out. We're in the calm, lovely waters of Dover Marine here, and a little team paddled out into the sea. And I must say that when we came out of the marina, there was this huge swell coming in off the English Channel, you know, and I think everybody in that boat, I certainly was very nervous. But no, the boat rode up the swell, it sailed over it with no problem whatsoever. It sat high in the water, even in rough sea conditions, and it was a rough day. In retrospect, we were mad to go out. But the boat itself had no problem at all with big waves, heavy winds, and we had a most fabulous day. And from then on, we took the boat out fairly regularly. You know, had these wonderful shots of the ferries, and you know, we were ecstatic with what we created, and we were learning. So we'd learnt a lot about the constructional techniques of building a Bronze Age boat by actually making it, and now having it at sea and learning how it behaved. It's really been a wonderful exercise in experimental archaeology. We've taken it on long sea journeys along the south coast of Britain, from Folkestone over to Dover. You know, and again, wonderful, wonderful experiences going under the white cliffs of Dover, way out at sea. I think we did 7 or 8 miles that day. But the last big test we had was we entered it into the Great River Race in London. Now this was a bit crazy, really. It's an annual event, has 350 historic boats and modern boats who paddle 25 miles from the River Thames, from East London right through the heart of central London, went round to Twickenham. Now all the other boats in this race were lightweight, fast boats, and our boat, of course, weighed a ton, you know, which is quite different to them, and none of them believed we'd ever finish. And it was the most fantastic experience. Surprisingly, the Thames is very, very choppy, very rough, particularly when you're going under these bridges. But yes, we paddled the boat 25 miles. We didn't even come in last. We came third from last out of a field of 350, even though we were the first to set off. But we were very proud about not coming in last. And again, a really good exercise for our replica boat. 25 miles is a long way, and the last few miles were very hard, just very tough. We were exhausted. But again, we learned so much. And it was the most wonderful experience to take a Bronze Age boat up past the Houses of Parliament, through central London. And the organisers even gave us a special trophy for sporting endeavour, which is the best thing of all. So that was a very important thing, that experimental archaeology. But it wasn't the only part of experimental archaeology that the project involved. And I'll hand over to Anne to take that through. Thank you.
Yes, you had a second experimental archaeology, and we also engaged in experiment metallurgy, working with Jean Dubos, a compagnon du devoir and a brilliant craftsman. Personally, I have worked with him for 20 years. The first time we produced a Celtic fibula brooch based on an example excavated at the Great Oppidum on Bibracte. Our objective were to produce information about metallurgy for the exhibition, showing the different techniques using during the Bronze Age. To produce a short film about the process for the exhibition too, to evaluate the time required, the technique employed, and the skill required. So we work as ancient craftsmen following the complete chain operatoire. Here you can see different sort of mold we made, stone and clay, along with an axe blend made of wax. The clay mold were fired at least 10 hours to remove any trace of humidity. If the mold were not completely dry, they should shatter when the bronze eggs were cast. After the cooling, the clay mold were broken and the stone mold opened to reveal the brut de coulée and the rope casting of the axe. Here, the final operation of hammering, hefting, and sharpening to produce the finished objects. Thanks to experimental archaeology, we can better understand different craft skill and the traditional manufacture technique used by craftsmen such as shipwrights and bronze worker. All this result formed a key element in the outreach and educational aspect of the project. We can see now. Telling people what was at the heart of the project, achievement by several different approaches. First, we talk yet about exhibition. As very important action in the project, there was an international exhibition. It was really a big challenge to organize this in a very short time, just 12 months, with a masterpiece, the replica, this famous replica of the boat at its earth. For this exhibition, we work with a Belgian design agency, Cassen, chosen by way of an international competition. One difficulty for this exhibition was having 3 places, and 3 very different ones. One old castle, one very large modern building, and one small museum, the latter, without enough space to show the replica of the boats, but with the real one. So to summarize the challenges of the exhibition, we had 3 languages obligation of Brussels, 3 exhibition venues, 3 categories of public, 7 sequences, the boat replica as a centerpiece, artifacts from many archaeological sites with some masterpieces like gold requiring high-level security. Just to show example about the design of the exhibition, sequence 1, the boat in its time from a long-term perspective. Sequence 1, inside, you see the double boats, and today, where is it? Top one. You know, the time here to explain the average survival rate and chronology and long-term chronology, have a rubbish bin, as you see here, to explain adequacy of material and generation 2. Sequence 2, just to show the presentation of text in English, in French, in Flemish. Sequence 3, craftsmen and manipulation for children and for public. Seconds about travel with the same concept. So 3 languages, a visual behind 3 languages, and all the time proposition to do something, not only to read text. Sequence 5 of the exhibition, something about the life and possibility here to do a menu, and it was necessary to put element in, and it was terrible for people and for children to realize it was not possible to eat chocolates and crisps during Bronze Age periods. Very difficult moment for them. Sequence on one sequence of the exhibition was dedicated to death and ritual. Quite difficult sequences, to be honest, to present death and to present hordes of Bronze Age, difficult subject to explain. We made a catalog in 3 languages too, with 7 chapters linked to sequences. The organization of the exhibition, and as usually we had problem with the boats, and with the boats with door, because it's a very old town, Boulogne-sur-Mer, and door of the castle is quite, and the boat was too big to enter. So we create a solution with, you know, Peter here with rubbish bin, a colleague to organize the way to enter in the castle, and again problem with the boats and with the door. But we found all the time solution in a good atmosphere to organize the place of the masterpiece in the exhibition here in Enam, in Boulogne here. Some view of installing the exhibition with an international team, and it was really a wonderful human experience with a very strong collaboration between every colleagues, and quite a sort of big family we create with the project. Just to show some colleagues and friends during installing. And just to some words about the exhibition, we think we hope we create a good exhibition, and the best compliment I think was made by the colleague and friend Ben Roberts, involved in the project, when he said, "I had a dream about an exhibition on Bronze Age, and we realized it." It was a good moment. With the exhibition, we organize conferences, scientific conferences, one in Boulogne-sur-Mer and one in Dover. And proceeding will be published by Oxford Books very soon, we hope. We organize 2 public lectures during exhibition in 3 countries with different partners or guests. 2 examples. We organize 2 open days, as Peter said before, with public and with moments dedicated especially to children to explain different things about the project before the exhibition, during the exhibition, and with a booklet in 3 languages too. To finish the project and to open it into the future, we create the boat kits you see here for children in England, France and Belgium, based on activities and displays in the exhibition, and furthermore roads and accompanying teacher's guide, and including both real artifacts and 3 replica objects in the kits. The idea is that the future of archaeology is in our school with the children, European citizens of tomorrow. So now the project is finished, not finished completely because we are here tonight, and but its life continue with the kids, and in the team we still remain with even more questions. So I will let Peter finish with and to conclude.
Okay, thank you, Anne. So, after all the excitement of exhibitions and reconstructions and working in the classroom, we now have a moment of reflection. We have the opportunity to reflect and ask ourselves, did we find our maritory? Just to finish on a slightly more technical area, I think that we and others have rather hijacked this term maritory and use it in a way that Stuart Needham did not really intend. Stuart was arguing from a very specific data set, the exotica of the early Bronze Age, the amber, the jet, the faience, tin, gold, shale, and more specifically the special cups he discussed at some length in the preliminary report on Ringlemere and the gold cup from Ringlemere. In this, he specifically saw the interpersonal or intergroup relations being facilitated within the Channel Southern North Sea maritory, CSNS maritory, being driven by, or rather being characterized by what he called cosmologically driven exchange. The concept of maritory was a form of geographic system that embraced belief systems and specific practices over and above physical and mechanical aspects of interaction. And he specifically maintained that a maritory should not be seen as analogous to a culture zone. He envisaged a maritory as a zone of privileged or relatively high flux interaction used for the execution of certain specialist maritime exchanges. We in the project, of course, ignored all that because we presented evidence for a transmort culture zone with apparently very deep levels of cultural similarities in many spheres, in ceramics, in metalwork, in funerary practices, in domestic architecture, and on and on. And it's seemingly many levels of society. You know, it's not just the elite who seem to be having these similarities. So if we apply the term maritory to this culture zone, we're extending the meaning of Stuart's term and ignoring some of the nuances of his argument. Sorry, Stuart. To be fair, it wasn't lost on Stuart who saw his idea of the CSNS maritory as an explanation of how the later culture zone initially developed, which he describes as the Channel Bronze Age, Cyril Marcigny and Emmanuel Guesquer as the Manche Mer du Nord complex, and I have described it as the people of the La Manche, a vast techno-cultural complex on the coasts of the English Channel. But having said that, I'm not sure that this particular genie can be put back in the bottle. The term maritory is too useful in relation to maritime interaction networks or maritime cultural zones, giving its emphasis on the importance of taking into account cultural belief systems and perceptions in trying to explain such phenomena. However, though there seems to be a lot of evidence that does suggest a maritime cultural zone in the Transmanche area that may have arisen from Stuart's CSNS maritory, evidence that we presented as a central theme of the Boat 1550 project, there is still a lot of work for us to do. First of all, at the challenges as I see it. First of all, is our Transmanche culture real? I think all of the team are aware that we need to be more rigorous with our data. Are we just cherry-picking those elements that seem to demonstrate cross-channel connections, whilst ignoring possibly the bulk of the rest of the data that doesn't suggest this at all? I think we need some more quantitative analysis to support the concept of a Transmanche cultural zone. We haven't proved it yet, I think. I don't think we have really explored the theoretical basis of how such a putative maritime cultural zone maintained itself over time. Stuart may have given us clues as to how it came into being, but such apparently powerful and deep-rooted cultural similarities across the seas needs explanation in terms of the social practices that made it possible. Ethnographic parallels, anthropological and social theory need to be harnessed to further develop the model of this possible cross-channel community, and I think we still need to explore that more fully. We also need to address the issue diachronically. Catherine Freeman's work on the exotic flint daggers of the early Bronze Age showed that cross-channel connections existed before the CSNS maritory, and that these geographical connections changed over time. Similarly, we might think more on what happened to cause the demise of our Manche Mer du Nord cultural complex and what followed after. And if we are to expand the concept of maritory to relate to maritime culture zones, then this should be articulated more specifically, and the elements of a maritory set out in Stuart's article should be reviewed and, if necessary, expanded with a more robust identification of the elements that we need to find in the archaeological record to demonstrate such things. So, I don't think I'm being negative. I think we've gone a long way to exploring this phenomenon, but I do think there are archaeological and theoretical challenges that we need to pursue in the years to come, and we fully intend to do that. But I also think that the project did achieve many things. Certainly, I think we feel it was a great success in retrospect, and we had many important achievements. Firstly, coming back to our boat, we have a much more nuanced understanding of the original Dover boat, how it was constructed and its seafaring capabilities. And we are currently writing up a report on this, but I think we still have more to do in terms of sea trials and mechanical testing of our half-scale replica, and possibly even think about building a full scale. We also have done a lot of work on collating the old evidence and the new evidence that's come from preventive or rescue archaeology over the last 20 years for cross-channel cultural contact during the second millennium BC. It's very interesting. The exhibition itself brought together many finds that had often never been seen by the public before, and some had been in storage in bank vaults and things for 30 years or more. So it was very good, and I think the catalogue itself is a big achievement in publishing and presenting some unseen finds in that way, to not just the general public, but to a specialist audience. Right. The development of connections between researchers in both the academic and commercial archaeological worlds on either side of the channel. This has been really exciting, actually. A lot of commercial archaeologists on the treadmill of producing grey literature reports, etc., not being able to lift their heads out of the trenches and look around them. We've seen an enormous impact, so certainly I have in professional units working in the southeast, a much greater awareness of the possibilities of cross-channel contact and the implications for interpreting their work, not just in the Bronze Age. We see a lot of people now thinking about this in other prehistoric periods, in the Iron Age, in Neolithic. New conferences are being held about maritime archaeology and possible maritime connections in all periods. There's another conference coming up this autumn in Boulogne-sur-Mer, looking at Roman cross-channel contexts. So it's been very exciting and exhilarating, actually seeing the impact that looking at one period has had on professional archaeology and, of course, on the academic world in other periods from that to which we've focused on. And, of course, the far-reaching public outreach and education programme, promoting our common cultural heritage and inviting reflection on modern-day socio-political concerns. Well, there's a bit of, newspeak there, a bit of spin on it, but in actual fact, it is interesting. On our TV screens, we're always seeing, particularly when you think about the issues like immigration, etc., and down in the channel, we're very much on the front line of the idea of otherness, of difference, of foreigners, outsiders, of the setting up frontiers and boundaries. I mean, if you look at the landscapes around Dover or around Calais and Boulogne-sur-Mer, the coasts are littered with fortifications of all periods, from Dover Castle to the great Napoleonic forts, to the pillboxes and the stop lines of the Second World War. And we have a whole generation who have been brought up with the idea that the Channel is a boundary. It keeps us apart and keeps the strangers out. And this is true on both sides of the Channel. With this project, we were able to go to the children, to go to the general public and say, well, maybe that's the case today, but it hasn't always been like that. If we go back 3,500 years, we find that people were part of the same entity. They were a family. They were using the same types of things. They were crossing the seas. The sea brought them together and didn't separate them. And this has stimulated some really good, interesting conversations and dialogues with children, with adults who have come to the exhibition. And again, this has been a very satisfying thing that we have used archaeology to engage modern-day people, modern-day communities, to actually at least start thinking and discussing some of the bigotries that we take for granted so often in modern-day life. So that's something that we're very proud of. So, the future. As Anne said, the project is finished, but it's not finished. We've rolled out these educational kits, which are really good, and it's so fantastic that, I don't know what's happened up here, but in England, the Bronze Age is now on the school curriculum. So, all of a sudden, all of that educational material that we produced as part of the project has become very, very important to teachers meeting their requirements in the school curriculum. But whatever happens, that resource will be there for many years to come, and we are encouraging teachers in all three countries to take these kits back into the classroom and engage children with the issues that we hope the project has brought up. The replica boat. We take this to public events, to boat shows, where you saw us paddling up the River Thames there. It's a great way of actually bringing to public attention the project themes and the issues that we want to talk about. And we hope to continue that into the future. Next year we will be over in at the Fête de la Mer, the regatta in Boulogne-sur-Mer. We're going down to the Maritime Museum in Tatihu in Brittany, and we'll be doing a host of projects throughout South East England. And I hope perhaps if there's some suitable event up north, up in Scotland, that we could perhaps bring our replica up and give people a chance to paddle it along the tail or somewhere, I don't know. But it would be a nice idea. We're also actively involved in developing new collaborative projects to study the putative Transmanche maritory over the longue durée, and to articulate the mechanism by which such entities actually maintain themselves. And of course, another aspect of this, a project that Anne and I have been putting together to improve methodologies of recording and analysing ancient ship timbers. We're trying to expand this now to take some of the lessons we've learned from this project, collaborating with nautical archaeologists from all over Europe to really have a look, to develop a European-wide protocol, a consistency of recording and study of ancient boats that everybody can use. Also, this is my thing. I'm currently trying to find if it would be possible where to excavate the missing end of the Dover boat. I know exactly where it is. I know it's 2 meters down there, and finding the money and getting the political will to excavate the other end of the boat is proving very difficult, but it's aspirational for me. I'd love to get the rest of it out. The other thing, to build a full-scale replica. Whilst there's a huge amount of information we've got out of a half-scale replica, and an awful lot of questions about why we don't use proper scaling and proper modelling in nautical archaeology. We use it in many other fields of engineering, but not in studying boats. So there's a lot to do there. But there is talk about working. We've been working a lot in Kent, and I think it's all over the country, with soldiers who have been coming back from places like Afghan war, etc. And there's been a lot of feedback that getting involved in archaeological projects has been very, very useful in helping these soldiers actually come to terms and deal with the experiences they've had. And we've been discussing with the British Army now the possibility of working with such people to build a full-scale replica of the Dover boat, building on the knowledge that we've got from the half-scale. And they're being very positive. So that's a real possibility that we may move forward and build a full-scale replica in the next couple of years. And as I said earlier, we also are planning to do a whole series of technological studies and assessments of the replica that we do have to sort out some issues about physical behaviour. So just to finish off, Anne mentioned that we've built up something for family over the years, and it's very, very true that one of the interesting things about this project is that very few people in this project actually knew each other before it started. It was one idea that grew and grew as time went on, and we were all strangers at the beginning of the project. None of us knew each other. But as we've worked through the problems and dealt with the issues, we've become very close. We know each other's families, we go to each other's weddings and things like this. And it's very true that in an international project like this, the bonds that build up between people dealing with these challenges become very strong. And it's inconceivable, I think, to any of us in the project that now the project's finished, that we will not continue with those friendships, with that collaboration that we've enjoyed over the last few years. And so there's a great will that we continue, we find new collaborative projects into the future, perhaps looking at some of the issues I've raised. But certainly it has been a wonderful ride, a wonderful experience. And whilst people might say I'm mad, thinking to do something similar in the future, I think it's been very worthwhile. I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much for listening to both of us, and I hope that's of some interest to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, both of you, for such a splendid presentation. Before inviting any comments or questions from the floor, I thought I would just respond, hopefully on behalf of all of you, to Anne's opening comments. As a reasonable representative group of the people of Scotland, that we are totally with her and our countrymen, the people of Paris, in deprecating the ghastly things that happened there in the last few days, and in offering our wholehearted support to the French people in the difficulties they've had. And also as a society which represents the archaeological, the institutional, the commercial and amateur face of archaeology and historical and ethnological studies in Scotland, that we are determined to remain ever vigilant to watch that episodes like what's happened in Paris do not constrain or derail in any way the efforts which is important for us to make in the future in advancement of our subject. And again, we will stand shoulder to shoulder with the French and other people in that.